Somebody pointed me to a link to a Mr. Cropper video on the theory of labor value Marx thing, and so I shall respond. So here we go. Begin the fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here, about the theory of the exploitation of labor. In response to Springtime 916, the poor people who work in the factories, sure, they might get a job, they might, be able to afford some nice things while they're alive, but as long as the poor don't own the means of production, they don't really have a chance, right? Well, I put to you the question of, the massive mansions that were built by Rockefeller and company, J.P. Morgan and anybody else you mentioned in the 1800s, the robber barons, built huge mansions which employed a dozen or 24 gardeners and many maids and house servants and so on, and how many carpenters and how many skilled artisans to make the artwork and all of the trims and stuff all over the house.
It's kind of a bogus theory. Well, anyway, there's plenty in the early 1900s too. So what they're basically doing, because you're not going to deal with how they acquired their money, but basically the game is they stole the money from workers, and now they're obliging workers to do more work to get back their own money. I mean, it's insidious. It's double slavery. It's like, first work on our railroad for 10 cents a day and die maybe and blah blah blah, and then I'll hire your kids, to get back the money I gleaned from your work, that I stole from your work, and I'll hire them with that money to do more work for me, and perhaps die. I mean, it's just idiotic. Okay, then on the whole thing of these mansions, they have no lasting value. They don't do anything for people. It's not museum art. It's not being enjoyed by thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. No, it's being enjoyed by a dozen people a year, maybe. In the example of people like Forbes, who had palaces all over Europe full of toy soldiers, the only people that ever saw the art or the beauty or the majesty or any of that stuff were the housekeepers who had to dust his little toy soldier collection. It gets insidious to talk this way. I mean, gold plating toilets is not productive work. Building a bridge is. Building infrastructure for electricity is. Building a modest house that will keep many people comfortable over many generations is productive work. Wasting hours and decades, even in some cases, adorning one man's mansion is completely unproductive labor.
Well, if you would take all of his money away and say he doesn't need all that, look at all those people that would be out of work.
Wrong again. So if you took the money away, where would it go? Exactly. It would go back into the economy. It would go back into creating higher wages for people to have an incentive to improve themselves, to get more better things, a bigger house and a better car and all those things. It could be put right back into incentive carrots for real workers to do real valuable social work, not stupid idiotic work, not one mansion work, not palace on the hill work, but real work that had lasting value for all the people in the community, building sidewalks and roads and infrastructure that all the citizens could use instead of one elitist fucking prick.
Say that instead of building a massive house, J.P. Morgan, let's say, builds a medium-sized house, just enough that he, can get along with. He doesn't need much more than what he has, let's say. Just builds that and puts the rest of his money in the bank and keeps it in the bank and doesn't spend it on frivolous things, money and investments in business and stuff, but leaves a lot of his money in the bank instead of spending it on his personal luxury and wealth. He's depriving all those gardeners and artisans of their livelihood. But now that that money is in the bank has a bunch of money that it can lend out. So poor people who may not have a good station in life but maybe have good credit, they will be able to borrow some of that money for whatever.
Yeah, right. Poor people with good credit. That's an interesting concept. Look, most credit has to be collateralized. You're not gonna get any substantial credit without having some prospect of paying it back. except in the modern era, of course, where everything got completely out of control because the whole system was feeding off this debt you're talking about, this debt wealth. But what's the game? The game is, again, the rich man isn't putting the money in there for the investment purpose. He's not putting it there in a to keep in pace with inflation. No, he's again requiring somebody to he's gleaning a profit again. Again, he's got to take his percentage, and the only way he can acquire that percentage is he has to steal the values of some worker somewhere. Some worker somewhere has to do work, and they get to cut a piece of it off and call that their profit. Okay, their piece. They have to pay the emperor, and that's all it is. They're just paying the emperor.
Means they want to improve their life. They can borrow it for an investment purpose to make themselves richer. Or they can borrow it just to get like a car or a new stereo or something, and just pay it back and just enjoy it. They can do either one. It's up to them.
Or, yes, they can borrow it and then go bankrupt. And then, because of our idiotic system, we'll sit there and, we'll say, oh, okay, creditors, you're out of luck. So everybody who did business, they all have to put that into their cost of business. And so it goes back to making the consumer prices higher. So for all the consumers, so it's a tax on all the consumers for this artificial risk taking. Okay, and the bank's only liability is the fact that it has to just figure out how much profit. It just raises its profit margin, its interest rate, to accommodate its failure rate. But it's still a bunch of money. The only thing that's consistent in the whole process is, the only thing that's maintained in the whole process is the fact that standing surplus, acquired wealth, legacy wealth even perhaps, just inherited money, must demand its profit. Not to stay, not the surplus doesn't have to keep its value. No, it must earn, okay, a profit. And as soon as that's the expectation, it has to come out of the worker's back.
So a rich man can either spend his money on things he likes, which employs people, or he can put it in the bank, which leaves it in the bank so that people can borrow it. Either way, a rich man is the beneficiary of society. We're not even talking...
Yeah, wrong. You're the beneficiary of society. So you kind of misspoke there. That's exactly right. He's the parasite on society. He benefits off of society. He feeds off of it. He sucks their blood like a vampire bat. He's a parasite, nothing more. Doesn't do anything productive in any of this, either one of those processes. He's adding no value. That's the key thing. Building his mansion, he's adding no value. All right, putting his money in the bank, he's adding no value. He's doing no constructive value adding whatsoever. All he's doing is maintaining control and demanding and ripping and tearing a profit out of the worker's fucking sweat.
The means of production yet. Now let's talk about the means of production. Is it true that the poor need to own the means of production, elsewise they're disowned or whatever? Well, there was a very, very rich man who owned several different carriage-making factories and had virtually his entire fortune in the factory, the manufacture and sale of bridlery and stuff for horses and things. And when automobiles came into production and became commonly used, his fortune started to decline. And he didn't diversify or anything. He thought automobiles are stinky, smelling, stupid. I'm making this guy up, by the way. And so he didn't diversify. He stayed with horse carriages and his companies because he thought they'll be back in time. Cars are going to go out of style, and they'll all be sitting fine and pretty. Cars didn't go out of style. The guy lost virtually everything he had. Like I said, I made this guy up. And he had all of that.
Why make something up? I mean, what's the point of that? We have real-world examples of successes and failures. I mean, you could at least use one of those, even though it would be kind of irrelevant, because you can always point to one example for one thing or example for another thing, and we all play that game. But the point is, what's the general rule of the system? But, why make up a character? Come on.
At risk, okay? If you own the means of production, you are at risk. If it's a storm that destroys your building, hopefully you have insurance. Or if it's just society changes its mind. They want different types of shoes now, or they want different types of cars now, or they want different light bulbs now, and your company is out of luck.
Yeah, well, look, but the point is you can glean so much profit over a period of time that all risk is eradicated, because you can make more money than what your assets are worth. And, you know, there's many businesses now functioning because of stock markets on margins of, you know, where they have assets, you know, in stock money that's many times the actual value of their business. So the whole business could blow up and they could rebuild it 19 times with the bogus stock money. So come on, there's plenty. The rich have plenty of cushion. So I'll give you a real world example. There's, well, you know, the famous one, you know, the most famous one, Rosebud. You know, Hearst inherits $100 million. Okay, gets into the publishing game and says, "Look, all my competitors, I can lose $1 million a year for 100 years. So go ahead and try to compete with me." And he just bought up all the other talent, bought the best of every other business, destroyed all competition, and got himself a nice monopoly, and then could just completely exploit the circumstance. So it's just, and that's the norm.